Hi everyone, how are we all doing? Welcome to PAX Day 2 evening, I guess. Thank you so much for everyone coming here. This is amazing. I was just saying to the guys down the front here, I was expecting to talk to 20 people, 18 of which would be my friends, and instead this place is packed out. So thank you everyone. You guys are awesome. Shit, this is exciting. Before I start, is there any under 15-year-olds here? Okay, I'll just keep my swears to a minimum then. Welcome to the Indie Board Game panel. We are here to talk about indie board games and how to go about making them. Hold up, I don't know how to turn this thing on. We can introduce everyone. My name is Anthony Sweet, down the bottom from Handwritten Games. I'm a game studio back in Perth, writer and game designer. Got a couple of games here, and we'll talk all about that stuff later. And I'm going to pass off to these guys so they can introduce themselves as well.
I'll start if people can hear me okay. I'm not sure if my mic's clouds. Everyone hear me fine? Yeah. There's a couple of no's from down the back, so maybe a bit. Can you hear me now? I'm used to being a teacher, so I can probably talk very loud. Yes, we're hearing that. Okay. Not with the two mics, that'll get feedback.
Yeah, sure.
Right, okay, I'm Wesley Watt, second from the bottom. That's a copy of the game I'm doing at the moment called Guion, which may name change after talking publish at PAX. I don't actually know where the image came from that Anthony found.
Google images.
Stolen images.
Seriously?
IP.
Yeah. Someone reviewed it from Supernova.
That's completely news to me.
Hey, just be thankful because they liked your game, they didn't like mine.
Well, I didn't go to Supernova.
Oh.
Neither did my game. Was that made in China?
That's really weird then.
Okay, I'll sit down. That's me anyway.
Hi, I'm Thomas Elliott. I founded Sixpence Games, and I made Professor Pugnacious, which is a steampunk deck building game. And back in December, I ran a Kickstarter campaign for it and raised $22,598, and it is being manufactured right now.
Yeah.
That's why I don't have any copies of it with me.
G'day guys, I'm Paul Nicholas, along with Alex here to my left. We're part of Blue Room Games. We founded it in 2012, and we have so far crowdfunded our first game, which is Ninjitsu, via Plausible, which we raised $4,200 for.
Not as impressive coming.
Yeah, it feels like really underwhelming now that we have to follow that. Yeah, thank you for your applause and shake.
Theirs is actually in stores already, so that's 1,000% more impressive.
We've got it. It's real.
Like Paul said, my name's Alex. We made Ninjitsu, which is about ninja animals escaping a zoo, and I guess the rest was already said.
Hold your game up. Show people at least in the box. It's very cool packaging.
It's actually like a cage, like an animal would be in the zoo.
As was said before, we've actually got it in stores, so you can buy one if you want.
Yeah, if you want to go to the Good Games, what do you call it, table? Yeah, booth, that's a better word for it. If you want to go to the Good Games booth, they're stocking it there, so shameless plug.
All right, g'day everyone. Thanks for coming. My name's Sean Carroll. I'm from 93 Made Games. We started up in about 2008, and since then we've been self-funding our two games, Viewpoint and Viewpoint Reflections. We've got a whole bunch of other games coming out, but these are basically, if you like Uno and like Magic, you want to find that middle gap where you can either play it with your family or play it competitively. So that's Viewpoint.
Sweet, thank you very much, guys. Alrighty, so we're going to structure this into two sections. First, we're going to talk about designing board games, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to production and manufacturing board games. We will have a Q&A at the end, but if you have a really burning question that you need to ask straight away, just throw your hand up and we'll see what we can do. Alright, so first of all, let's talk about design. So let's get a little bit of vocabulary, equal vocabulary happening here, just so we're all on the same level. I think I'm actually going to throw over to the teacher here because he can explain this a lot better than me. So Wes, do you want to talk about the, I guess we talked about 4 different kinds of board games before?
Yep.
Yeah, if you want to give your brief definitions on how they work. Just so everyone knows what we're talking about. If we say Eurogame, people will know what that means.
Got it. Just swapping mics. Can people hear me down the back okay? No, maybe some
Let's
more.
turn it up a bit.
No, not both. One at a time. Otherwise we get that. Right, okay. So there's 4 major types of board game categories. They slightly overlap. The one that's very popular at the moment is called Eurogames. They don't know of the Eurogame movement. The people don't know of the Eurogame. There's a lot of nodding down the front. So Eurogame movement is stuff that's come in from Europe, surprisingly enough, that is very mechanically based games. So things about less thematic and more trying to work out a good system of gameplay. So Settlers, Carcassonne.
Farming. It's about farming.
It's about farming. It is not about farming. That was a bad analogy. Right, beyond that we have the party game movement, which has come up quite recently in terms of games that are played with a group of like 10 mates. So a lot of your apples to apples, games that don't take much thought, you can play very quickly, not massively mechanical. If anyone thinks apples to apples is mechanical, you're probably wrong. If you haven't played apples to apples, it's very much a pattern matching. People like put out cards and I go, I like that pattern, therefore you win, and I'm completely arbitrary about that decision. That's a party game, and lots of them are really, really good. Pictionary is another example of a party game as well. A very, very fun just game you play with your mates. What else we got? We have thematic games that have a theme first. So basically, trying to think of some good examples of thematic games. Ninjutsu's been painted on the table down here. So it's where you come with a theme and the mechanics kind of leverage off the theme. So ninjutsu is about collecting animals and giving them...
Collecting items and escaping out of the zoo.
Breaking out of a zoo as ninjas, so the animals collect items to basically get out. So that's an example of a thematic game.
Every zombie game there is.
Every zombie game is a very good example. You can apply themes, but generally, like the theme in Settlers is just tacked on. It's not important. It could be about tanks in Serbia, Russia. It could be about, Vikings, invading Sydney Opera House. It's all that type of thing. It could be anything put on top of that.
I want to play that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's make that game tomorrow. Fourth one. What's the fourth category?
Story games.
Storytelling games. So look, role-playing, I think, is a classic example. All the role-playing genres, like your Legend of Dritz, all those games where basically the story is critical, and that actually develops your game. For another one, Betrayal at House on the Hill is a very good role-playing game. You actually have a scenario, you break through, and basically you become characters and traders and heroes, and you come up with... So that's a story.
And also games where the actual mechanic is to make the story. So a game like Gloom, where people are having to improvise and create the story themselves as they're going. Cool. Thank you, Wes. So now we've got a basic definition of what the different style of games we've got. The basis of any board game that we're dealing with is a mechanic. And this is possibly why I love board games so much, is because when you're making a board game, you can't hide behind fancy graphics, you can't hide behind fancy sound, you can't hide behind fancy marketing, because there's no money in board games. But what you do have is straight gameplay. The gameplay is right there in front of you, you can pick it up and you can throw it at someone when they do something you don't like. But that's one of the reasons why I just love how board games work, because there's nothing else to hide behind. So, board game mechanics, let's have a chat to Tom. Let's have a chat to you. How would you define, or actually no, let's not do that. Let's say, what is your favorite board game mechanic you've ever seen?
I think the board game mechanic that has impressed me the most with, I looked at it and went, that's not going to be fun. And then I played it and I was like, wow, I can't believe they fit that much fun into that simple a mechanic, is Cthulhu Dice by Steve Jackson Games, where the entire game is a single D12. And yet they still manage to get an actually fun thematic game where you're playing as cultists who are trying to sacrifice each other to Cthulhu, and all you do is roll the d12 and see what happens. But it's still I'm really impressed with how much fun they managed to fit into this much space.
Cool. Anyone else down the table?
I just want to add. I just want to add to that it's not necessarily about the mechanic. I mean, the mechanic makes the game flow along, but it's if you can design a game which people want to keep playing. So replayability is a very important factor.
So how do you guys design for replayability then?
Playtesting.
Oh god, yes, playtesting. Do it. Yeah. Don't ever stop doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've jumped ahead a little bit what I was going to say, but playtesting is one of my second favorite things in the world. I could talk about that for 3 hours. But the importance of playtesting is never lost on any game designer. And a game can be as successful only as successful their playtesting was. And it's a very multifaceted and fairly difficult kind of thing. So let's just quickly have a chat about playtesting. How have you guys gone about playtesting? Ninjutsu guys.
Oh, well, we started on cardboard pieces, just handwritten cardboard pieces.
Me too.
I think most of us do. It's just a cheap way of getting your game out there. From cardboard pieces, you can test everything about your game, from drawing cards, how the game functions. You can even start working in design into the cards, because you're like, oh, I really need to see this part here, I really need to see this part there. From that, you start showing other people. If other people are interested, you start getting the replayability. You have to keep it really interesting. Like, you can't have the same boring mechanic going over and over again. I think a lot of games, you need multiple mechanics to keep the replayability going.
I think that's how you actually know if you've got a really good game on your hands, is that if you're playing it on this, like, you know, just like pencil and paper type thing with, like, you know, next to no graphics, it's all just like written words, and people are still having a really good time playing that game. That's how you know, yeah, this is going to be a good one. Definitely.
So one thing that I really want to impress on everybody about playtesting is that don't just do it yourself. Get other people to do it for you. I made like a PDF of just plain text cards of all of the stuff, and then I sent it out to all of my friends, and I got some people in California to playtest it for me, and I'm friends with Zvi Moshevitz, who's a professional Magic the Gathering player, and he set up a group of like 40 people in New York who played it, and I was not there for either of those playtests, so they had to go off the rules that I had written and the blank, like the cards with no art on them, and they gave me feedback on that, and so I learned not only a bunch of stuff about like the mechanics as I had written them, but also like, oh hey, there's this sentence here that confuses everyone, even though to me it's totally obvious what it means. And so, yeah, get other people to playtest it without you being one of the players.
Yeah, totally. Like the way mechanics or the way game rule can get interpreted can be so completely different. So I guess what we're talking about there is two kinds of playtesting. First of all, I guess we'd call that in-house playtesting, where the designer's there, and ideally you'd want to try and do that and not interact with the players and just sit and watch them, but chances are they're going to turn to you as God anyway and ask, hey, what does this actually mean? But then the really useful form of playtesting is going to be, I've had a mental blank on what we call it. Blind. Thank you. Blind playtesting, which, as Tom was talking about, is you don't want the designer in the room at all, because everything has to be on the board or in the rules.
They have to interpret it and understand how it works without you telling them.
Yeah.
And you definitely need to, like, one added point should be put to this as well, that everybody has got that one douchebag friend that just likes breaking any single game that they play. Like, they try and find that combo, they try and find that thing that just makes everybody else have a horrible time and just breaks the game. You want that person in your playtest, because they are going to find every little loophole and thing wrong with your game and make that blindingly obvious to you. The last thing you want to do is put out a game and then have this combo come out, or this like game-breaking mechanic be made obvious, and there's nothing that you can do to stop it then. It's out there.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the worst part about that, and that's the thing with the creativity as well, is that you're putting your heart out for people to break, essentially. And it can be really emotionally taxing as well. Like, I remember I read a blog post from Daniel Solis over in America, and he talked about the playtesting hangover, where after a playtest you just feel horrible. It doesn't matter how good the game went, but you just feel really, really bad because something did not work. And this is your pride and joy, and you want this thing to work so bad. And it can be almost, I mean, it sounds really bad, first world problems. My board game doesn't work, but it can end up being fairly debilitating. And that's a hump I've had to get over a lot of times. How about you guys? Have you guys had any experience with the playtesting hangover?
I definitely would have. You can't have an ego when it comes down to it. People say they mean the best thing, and everyone has their own opinion, and it's great. You need to listen to every single opinion, because there's just going to be little bits and pieces there which just make your game the best game that it can be. But then you'll get interesting comments, such as we had one when we went to Gen Con, and we'd already launched Viewpoint, and we had some other games that we were going to produce. One was a gladiatorial game, and it had dragons in it. And one of the comments from one of the playtesters was that, oh, the dragon's wings aren't big enough, it wouldn't be able to support its body. But the thing is, it's a dragon. It doesn't exist, so you're going to get those wacky comments. But yeah, take it all on board.
And killing your darlings, right? So we're talking about not having the ego and letting yourself get out of the way of the game. So there might be something that you really, really love. And I've gone through this a lot of times, where you just love about your game, and this is going to be the best part, this thing that makes it fantastic. People are going to think you're a god and put you on a mountain. And it just doesn't work. And your players will sometimes tell you that doesn't work, or sometimes they just go, yeah, that was okay, but I didn't feel such and such. And you've got to have the strength to be able to cut the thing that you love, to make the game leaner, to make it tighter, and to make it a better game. So, hey, let's do some personal stories. What's the thing you've really hated to cut out of your game, starting with Wes?
A few of my first games, and this is like my 20th game I've made so far that's now going to publishing, so I've had quite a bit of experience of games that haven't gone to publishing. A few of my first ones pretty much flopped in the first time. With this back to playtesting, I'll go through, logically work out in your head and make sure it's mechanically sound, then play it yourself, then play it with people. If you skip playing it with yourself, you often show it to people and they go, that was really, really bad. And you go, yes, that was really, really bad. So my first game was called Ultra Koi, which is basically controlling koi, mentally powering, controlling koi around a fish pond, and it had absolutely no gameplay to it whatsoever. So that was something I pretty much had to look at and go, yes, let's not talk about that ever again, which is bad playtesting. I'm bringing it up now. At least no one's listening. It's good.
Tom?
So in Professor Pugnacious, I had a lot of cards that that would like trash. It's a deck building game, so trashing cards to get them out of your deck is really useful because you start off with crappy cards. And I had a lot of cards that were like, if you trash a card, then you can do this cool thing. And then when I did the playtesting with Zvi, he was like, all these cards that let you trash things are really overpowered. You should get rid of all of them. And I was like, oh, all right, well, okay. And so we worked together a bit, and then we actually came up with a way, like there's a thing that everyone always has access to that is the only way to trash cards, and now it's one of my favorite parts of the design. So if you guys play it after this panel, I can tell you which part I'm talking about.
Yeah, I definitely have to say, getting rid of as crazy as this is going to sound, getting rid of the random chaos that we actually had in our game and making it extremely balanced. Because when we first had it, it was pretty much all that's why I tapped the box when they mentioned thematics. Because it was a very thematic game and everything with the game made perfect sense with the thematics and was super fun to play. But of course, the whole reason why we made this game was to kind of have a game that bridged the gap between hardcore gamers to casual gamers. Something that you could pop out and that all the Magic players and Mage War players and stuff could, get on board with it, and all the people that either don't play board games or card games at all.
We needed a game that all the single ladies would play with us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, everyone knows, yeah.
Games get all the kills.
So definitely having to reimagine the whole thing and kind of decide, well, we're gonna have to sacrifice a little bit of the thematics in this game in order to make it balanced. And and to most people they'd be like, yeah, that's fine. I don't see what's the problem with that at all. But
we hate random stuff.
But as opposed to keeping it in sync with how it was a little bit heartbreaking at the time.
A little bit back on playtesting. When you get to playtest the actual designed elements, I'm a graphic designer, so I did all the artwork for our game, and we had a friend that, besides trying to break all the rules, also has an extremely dirty mind. So some of the cards he could point out and tell us how dirty they actually were, and we had to kill some of the design elements, which broke my heart.
Yeah, see when you play the game if you can spot the bra. You'll find out.
There's still a bra in there, yeah.
You'll find out.
You can also sort of crowdsource design elements like that to a degree. When I had a few different card designs that I was having difficulty picking between, I started a thread on r/boardgames. I was like, hey, here's 3 pictures in an Imager album. Tell me which one you think is best. And then got 150 responses. And that's 150 times as many people talking about it as I had before.
And in terms of well, I'll just flat out say I've stolen friends' ideas. They'll come play testing my games. I'll say, oh, they'd be really cool if you could do this, and I'll be thinking, oh yeah, I'll think about that. But internally, I'm going, that's a great idea. I should implement it, and it's better than anything I've come up with. And so the thing there as well is, as I said before, getting out of the way and just allowing yourself to be open to whatever influences you have, and allowing people are going to see things in your game which you're not going to see as well because you're so involved in it and so attached to it, and. It's just nice to have that outside perspective. And as we were talking about having the euphemism guy in your gaming group for once can actually be really,
That's
really
a nice
helpful.
way of putting it.
All right, so one of the last things I wanted to touch on in design was how you actually go about making a game mechanic. Now, I know that we're all quite very different designers up here. We've got probably half and half thematic and mechanic designers. I saw you shrug there, Tom. So how do you come up with mechanics?
Well, the reason I was shrugging is I don't think that games can be easily divided into those categories. I think it makes some amount of sense, but I think that there are more games that aren't easily in one of those categories than that are.
Yep.
As to how do I come up with mechanics? So there's a really good book called The Art of Game Design by, I think, Jesse Schnell? Shell? Okay, yeah, it's a really good book. You should all read it if you're interested in this at all. But the main takeaway from it is that games are meant to create an experience, and so everything that's in the game should be contributing towards that experience. And so don't make a mechanic just because the mechanic is cool unless it makes sense in the game, and don't have like theme that is not supported by the mechanics. And so if you have, so like with Professor Pugnacious, I started making that because I wanted a deck building game that was more interactive than most deck building games are, where you're sort of like 4 people playing solitaire and seeing who gets stunned the fastest. But which is not to say bad things about other deck building games. I love like almost all of them. So I was coming at it from okay, how can I make the game be more interactive, and like what sort of mechanics can I do that will there's the card pool in the middle. Normally everybody has access to the same thing. What if everybody has a different one, but you can affect what's in the other guy's pool that he can buy from? Stuff like that. The other stuff that I'm working on now, I more came up with the theme first and then started trying to come up with mechanics afterwards to do it. I guess I've come at it from both directions. Either come up with the mechanics and then see what theme makes the most sense with it, or come up with the theme and then figure out mechanics that will execute that theme for you.
I think Tom's got a very good suggestion there. Who's actually read a game design book? Can I have a show of hands? So there's some serious people here. Read as much as you can and keep coming to these types of panels. But if you want some tips of what books, then probably come up to the panel afterwards and we can give you some good guidance on that.
Podcasts too. There's some good podcasts as well, which make it much easier if you don't have time to read. The Game Design Roundtable with Dirk Niemeyer and John Schaefer, I think, is a really, really good one. I can't think of any off the top of my head. If you guys got suggestions.
I was going to say there's something that you guys are going to absolutely hate to do, but to come up with fantastic mechanics, you need to play a lot of games.
Who wants to do that? But that's probably like the main difference between, I'd say, like Euro games and American, or like, all the other style of games as well, as was mentioned at the start, is that Euro games essentially focus on the mechanics and revolve the theme around that, where all the American style and any other type of board game that pretty much isn't from Europe revolve their mechanics around the theme. And that's what we did. We thought, what'd be a cool theme? Ninja animals escaping a zoo, like fighting over like piranha infested moats and fighting off laser samurai robots, etc. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
Sounds sweet.
How are we going to make that happen? And then that's when we came up for the idea for mechanics. Like, some people are just very mechanically minded. Like, there's a guy that I know that runs Good Games Blackburn, who's always talking about the latest games that he's designed, and he is very Euro gamer minded. He's got all these ideas for mechanics, but only about half of them have actually got themes attached to them. And that's pretty much the major difference between what direction you want to go in. If you're mechanically minded and you got really good at coming up with all these different mechanics, that's pretty much like Euro games is going to be your forte. Whereas if you prefer coming up with a theme and then working mechanics that around that theme, then of course the other games are going to be really what you're more suited towards. You got to find your strengths and know what you're good at.
And have a graphic designer friend, that helps too.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
That's the only reason why I'm friends with this guy.
I hired an artist. I recommend doing that.
Yeah.
I can't draw and I know it.
My friends have seen my stick figure prototypes. They're not pretty.
I'm also a graphic designer, so that makes my job easy. It's one of the things I do as well.
I personally much prefer people to pay graphic designers.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Just say it.
Was that a plug?
They're totally worth the money.
Cool. So I think we've talked about design quite a bit. So let's move on to the.
Can I throw in one last
yeah,
thing?
Go for it.
So you mentioned playing a lot of games to inspire you. That's totally a good thing, but I want to throw in a word of warning that if you're like, I want to make a worker placement game, so I'm going to play every worker placement game. Beware like getting fixated on mechanics that other people have already invented. I have finished working on a game called Save the Singularity that's going to be up on Kickstarter in a few months probably, once I've actually sent out Professor Pugnacious. It's a dice game about preventing the robot apocalypse. And I was like, okay, dice game. I want to make a dice game. I'm going to play a bunch of dice games. And then I did, and then when I was trying to come up with the mechanics for Save the Singularity, I kept being like, okay, so here's my mechanics. Oh, they're really complicated. I'm going to combine these things. Oh, I can get rid of that. Oh, I can change it. Oh, it turned into zombie dice. And I just kept doing that and kept turning into zombie dice. And so for like a month, I just couldn't come up with a design because I was too hooked on zombie dice. And so I had to just like stop playing that and stop playing dice games for a while in order to let my brain empty and actually be able to come up with new mechanics. So don't plagiarize.
Can we just put a question out to the crowd for a second? Talking about rip-off games, everyone knows Uno. Does anyone actually know what Uno was a rip-off of? We got shakes of heads. No one.
One guy at the back.
Yeah, one person,
out.
3 experience points.
Correct. Good work. So
Chocolate for you, but I can't throw that far.
even the greatest games sometimes leveraged off other games.
And we got a chocolate coming up the back for the winner.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Woo!
Right at the back, like in the with the hand up.
There he is.
Yeah.
So one of the things that was mentioned before as well is games literacy, and maybe they weren't joking so much as you're not going to like it, but playing games that you don't like is also really important as well, because you're not playing them just to enjoy them, but playing them why you don't enjoy them, which can also inform your design more than games that you do like.
I like to watch people who like a game that I don't like play it and see why they like it.
Tom likes to watch.
It's also actually really good to find out what you don't like about games. So for us, we really, really dislike downtime in a game. It's the most hated thing we can think of. So in every single game we've made so far, the downtime is next to nothing.
We should definitely play Professor Pugnacious after this.
I'll be there.
Can I ask the dirty question? And if you don't want to answer, it's completely fine because we are in a public forum. But what's your least favorite game? Starting with
Warcraft.
Warcraft.
Has anyone played Warcraft, the board game? Did you like it?
I'm sorry.
No. Massively flawed game. It actually ended up with one of your first characters you have in the game was invincible. How that went through any playtesting, I couldn't work out, but the game looked stunning and was utterly broken. And I eventually went around and
We'll try to keep the range short.
yeah, right, short range, done.
Tom,
My least favorite game is Apples to Apples. Okay, I'll tell you a brief little story, which is why. And this is because every single game of Apples to Apples is like this. Somebody plays the word large. The entries are an elephant, a redwood tree, the moon, the Milky Way galaxy, and monkeys. Guess which one wins?
Monkeys.
It's always monkeys, because people are like, monkeys, that's intrinsically funny, so even though it doesn't have anything to do with the word large, I'm gonna pick monkeys. And I'm just going... And,
Maybe there's a problem with game designers, because I should point out Apples to Apples has done very, very well.
Yes.
As much as we don't like it, we can't just go rule it out as being crap, because it's obviously not crap.
And that is once a game as well that has been ripped off by Cards Against Humanity.
But I think
and that was very successful as well.
Cards Against Humanity is a strict improvement over Apples to Apples, because Cards Against Humanity, every card is intrinsically funny. And so then they're like, oh, I'm not going to pick the intrinsically funny one, I'm going to pick the one that actually matches up with the prompt and does something funny. So
I can't watch games of Cards Against Humanity with my wife in the room.
okay, there's one disadvantage to Cards Against Humanity. But
Definitely what you would not dub a family game.
Least favorite game?
Well, we only just played this today, like just before. It was so it's the only one I really couldn't say that I wasn't impressed by. Was you like Say Anything?
Oh, no, that wasn't what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, no, it was Say Anything. It just seemed to be a worse, dodgier version of Boulder Dash. I don't know if I'm missing something here, but I just couldn't see the appeal to it at all.
Alex?
I'm going to get a lot of hate, but I specifically dislike Munchkin. No, not so much hate. Oh, that's good.
We're in the right crowd.
Oh, actually, I spent a long time thinking about why I dislike Munchkin, and I think I figured out.
tell ya.
I'd like to hear what you have to say, and I'd also like to comment on it. If I may.
We could discuss this, but it could take either 3.5 hours or about 5 minutes.
Munchkin
Like a game of
has
Munchkin.
amazing thematics, and it makes you laugh for the first couple of games. It is a terrible game. You can't.
That's the hard thing about comedy games, though, right? Because the comedy games are based on a joke, and once you
need to
know
have
the joke,
mechanics to back it up.
but once you know the joke, then the game's gone.
The thing that Munchkin tries to do and succeeds at really well is it's a very random game. It fluctuates wildly what's going on in it, and so most games of Munchkin are sort of like boring and not very memorable or anything.
And right at the end, it's anticlimactic.
Yeah, but then there's like that 1 in 100 game where something really exceptionally amazing happens that can't possibly happen in like Settlers of Catan, which is very like there's never somebody wins with 1,000 times as many points as anybody else in Settlers. But in Munchkin, you can have like there's a low chance of something really incredible happening, and so that's really memorable. Like I can specifically remember a certain set of moves that happened in Munchkin like 7 years ago to me, and I can't remember that for like any other game. So even though I don't like it on the whole, that is the thing that Munchkin tries to do and succeeds at. So
All right, we should stop hating on the Munchkin.
Leave it alone.
Sure.
It's not that bad.
I have to say 2 games for roughly the same reason. Pandemic number 1.
What?
Okay, I'll leave now if you guys but essentially, I just played it, and there's a one character where he can play every other character, and it's co-op, but you just sit back and you're just going, okay, this is fun watching other people play. And then Melbourne is another one which is sort of similar. You just flip a card, I'm stuck, I can't do anything, flip a card, I'm stuck. So games where you just bog down doing nothing.
That reminds me of Flux, if you guys hate Flux as well.
I also hate Flux.
I'll go on the record to say my least
love
favorite
Pandemic.
game is Fantasy Flight's Android, because I wanted to love that game so much, and I hate to hate it, but I just can't. No, it's no.
Box of bits.
Yeah, box of bits.
But Netrunner is awesome.
Yes, I do like that.
So it's ninjutsu.
All right, so that's design plenty. Let's move on to the more business end of production. And I'm assuming this is probably what a lot of people in this room are interested to hear about, is how do you actually go about to making a board game? You have the idea, you've got your paper prototype with all your handwritten bits, you know, your partner's helped you cut them all out with a sign and the roll of the eyes, or maybe that's just me. And you want to find out, where do you go to get it printed? How do you get it into game stores? How do you get it into gamers' hands? Now, we've got quite a bit of experience on this panel here, ranging from self-publishers to people who've done crowdfunding to people who've approached publishers and also print on demand. Let's start with the really difficult one of self-publishing, where you're funding everything yourself, you're finding all of your printers yourself, and this is going to go to Wes and Sean. How did you guys get started with the self-production? Self-publishing?
Money, first off. Obviously, with the crowdfunding, you can get money from your loyal fans. It's the main thing for any endeavour is you need money and time. Now, for self-publishing, we had to go locate a manufacturer in China. When you go in Australia, it's about 10 times the cost. Maybe we should write some of this stuff up. I would recommend going to Alibaba.com, or you can Google Chinese manufacturers for card games and board games. So we'll just get
Very thorough in your research of them.
Yes. I mean, it's similar when you're self-funding. I think the only difference is that when you're crowdfunding, the money source is one thing, but when you're actually going through and producing it, that's the tricky part. So once you've found the manufacturer, you shortlist to probably 3, would you say, guys?
I think we had about 6 or 7, and we emailed them all right at the start, off the bat, just to get quotes and things. But to be honest, after 3 months, 2 of those websites had disappeared. And that's not where you want to be putting your money.
I was very scared of that sort of thing, so I hired Panda Games Manufacturing, which is a Canadian-Chinese company. They're the people who manufactured Pandemic, which lots of people like. Including me, I love Pandemic. So that's a little bit more expensive than just directly hiring a Chinese person, like from like a Chinese company.
It's just one guy. It's just one guy in a factory.
It usually is one guy.
It's like, why all the pressure?
It's
Ain't enough.
but
all the
they
Chinese-
also- but I mean, reputation is.
I've heard good things about Panda
Yeah,
G.
Panda is pretty.
Yeah, all the Chinese manufacturers are going to say that they've got quality procedures and 1,000 people in the back room, but really it's only one guy who's going to a bunch of different printers and bring it all together. So,
And their name's definitely John.
or Henry, we have. Yeah. So you've shortlisted, you've got your quotes. Once you're happy with your preferred, say, 3 quotes, go get prototypes. It's costly, once again, but
So at this stage, though, how much of the art do you have done?
all of it.
All of your art's done. So
yeah.
you're not doing any prototypes for these guys.
Now this is a sample of your fully
Of your
produced
completed art, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to get like prototypes, you can just go through Officeworks. So there is actual like companies. I can't actually name any off the top of my head. You'd be able to Google them, though. They're really easy to find. That
Okay.
actually make very basic and very cheap game pieces. One of my mates that I recently just designed a game went through that route, where he actually he's got something that would look like a professional prototype. Really impressive graphics, really impressive game pieces, but like the whole thing I think cost him like $150 to make, which might be a little bit expensive, but when you see that as like this is like a fully functional realized game and can definitely give people's 100% opinion on what that would be because they can see it like fully formed, you're gonna definitely it's worth every penny.
So what can help in the prototyping there is print-on-demand companies, which are guys that do small-run printing. I use guys called thegamecrafter.com. I highly recommend them because all of their pieces are great. They have a whole shop full of just game pieces and resources and dice and pawns and all that, and they do printing as well, tiles, cards, quite a few shapes as well, and they're always adding to the amount. And they do final product printing as well, but I've found like the per unit cost, like each individual unit is very high, and on top of that, because they're using United States Postal Service, the freight gets very expensive as well. But for the purposes of prototyping, they are brilliant. You can get proper card hex tiles if you're using them. You can get proper 300 GSM cardstock cards, and everything feels professional, everything looks professional, and they're not the only print-on-demand guys. There's also Superior POD and a couple of other folks, but I've only dealt with the Game Crafter, and they've been brilliant. Has anyone else done print-on-demand stuff?
I got some sample cards from drivethroughcards.com.
Oh, how'd that go?
I ended up, or rather, I let the artist that I hired make the decision as to whether it was good enough. I thought that it was great, but the artist was like, no.
What, just
We're
in terms
very
of the print
picky.
quality?
Yeah, in terms of, apparently if you have better eyesight than mine, you can see all these things that are wrong and too many pixels or not enough pixels or something.
How do you actually write that, the drive-through?
Through is spelled THRU.com, which is spelled .com.
I am writing things up on the board, but I think everyone up the back's probably not going to be able to see it, so I'm writing up some random notes. You might be able to come down later on if you actually want to just see someone
Take
doing it on
photos.
the board.
Yeah, if you want to ask us any of this again.
Maybe I'll go through some of the stuff I've done in mine. I slightly tackled it slightly differently. From graphic design, I've taught in graphic design before in actual production, so I kind of skipped the kind of going to another company where, well, I need a die cutter and a printer. Basically, is the two things I need. If you don't know what die cutting is, it's basically where they make blades, usually with a laser cutter. They actually put in blades into, they press out your entire board game. That's generally what you find. All your board games are made in boxes, and the boxes have bits you punch out. All that's done with blades cut out. So the term's die cutting. If you find a die cutter around, there's one in Perth, and that's called Joyland. There's one, I might put that down since I'm obviously from Perth.
I know one in Victoria, if you don't want to go to Perth.
Yeah, there's look one up. Obviously, the only one's close to me. But they actually do die cutting. So I end up buying a commercial printer, so I have a printer myself. So I printed all my stuff off and gone to the die cutter and say, look, I've got 2 of these sheets. I need this pressed out. I'm going to give you all the artwork to do. Well, do the line work to make the die, send it off to laser cutter, send it back to the die manufacturer, and then get my games done. So that's the way I'll be tackling it, which is slightly. Probably a bit cheaper, but again, it's hand done in Australia, so it's actually going to end up being more expensive than getting it done in China. But
About 4 times more expensive.
yeah,
Yeah.
It depends. It depends on the company because 1,000 units of this at the very base price. This has it's full of pieces in it. 1,000 units is about $5.60 a unit, and that's pretty good. Since I think you guys were getting stuff like this done for $2.
$4 all up. $4
including shipping.
We got
obviously doesn't include shipping because I just go and pick it up.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's not just the die cuts and the artwork.
It's all the printing and packaging as well.
And the gluing and
finishing.
so on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that was including all that. That's basically getting me the finished product.
And we actually got a quote for this in Australia, and it was $12,000.
Yeah,
Or for 1,000
many?
users.
For 1,000, yeah.
units.
there's so the things that I did not expect to pay money for at the beginning, that I just wasn't thinking of when planning. Putting things on a boat from China to whatever continent you live on is very expensive. And then when the boat gets there, the government says, hey, we want some money too. And then you have to give them a lot of money. And these are, when I say very expensive, I mean like a few $1,000s.
You have to liaise with the manufacturer as well to get all the customs papers, quarantine papers, and paperwork up to there.
Customs was a big one, wasn't it? See, I haven't dealt with customs, obviously, but you guys had a big sting with, I think, a couple
Yeah,
of...
you basically feel like you're negotiating a hostage. Yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Give us our baby.
It's like, please, how much more money do you need for it? Just let him in.
We were definitely hit with a hidden cost. We thought we paid out everything all up, and then we had to spend another $1,000 out of our pocket for customs duties, extra postage. It was very painful.
And what were the terms for yours? Like when we purchased ours, we had to pay 30% up front, so out of thousands of dollars, and then before they'd actually ship it to us, we had to pay the rest of the 70%, so you actually have to put all the outlay before you can even get it on the boat as well.
We had nice Chinese people then. Well, we didn't have to pay it all like that.
The other
I've
thing
got the contract.
the other thing with printing as well that hasn't been mentioned yet, I thought deserves a little bit the spotlight, is 3D printing, which is kind of like coming up in ahead now. 3D printers becoming they used to cost ridiculous amounts for somebody to get, but if you actually have the money and you think it's a worthy investment, you're really serious about this, 3D printers are cheap enough now for people to buy them and keep them in their homes. And if you've got a printer,
you can buy, I think there's about 5 parts, about $150 you can buy, and it actually sets up a 3D printer for you to print out the rest of the parts to make your 3D printer.
that's how awesome they are.
And then you can print out another set of the same 5 parts that you originally bought and sell them on eBay and make your money back.
That's rep wrap. Is that rep wrap?
I assume that was rep wrap. That was
Rep wrap.
That sounds fun to say, right?
It's like you're scratching a DJ table. Rep, 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 rep.
Oh no, you didn't want to go there. We're in a board game panel, man. Come on.
Well, everyone listens to techno, right?
So there's plenty of printing. Let's talk about crowdfunding because that's pretty exciting, and we got lots of cheers from that. So at the moment, we're pretty hard struck with trying to figure out where to go for crowdfunding. We have Possible, which have had some successes, i.e. the Ninja 2 guys.
Do you have American friends who can make a Kickstarter
That's
account
the
for
thing.
you?
Yeah.
Do we?
They need to have a social cue.
American or UK friends?
So Tom, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the requirements required to get on the Kickstarter?
So I'm an American. I moved here to Melbourne last October, but I'm an American citizen. So I have an American bank account. And that means that I could get a Kickstarter requires you to get an Amazon Payments account. I don't really know at what stage they checked to make sure I was American. But right now, only Americans and British people can get Kickstarter accounts that let you start projects. Anybody can back it, but you have to be American or British to start it.
But what do you require? Just the bank account? And a social security number?
I'm
Security.
really not confident. I don't feel like giving legal advice to a crowd full of people who can beat me
Oh,
up.
yeah, of course. No, that is fair enough. And you guys did Possible.
We did
Which is
Possible.
the Australian version of Kickstarter.
Yeah, there's a couple of Australian crowdfunders, and it depends what you're going for. Possible is the main one, and there's one for community projects and other things, like if you're going to do something. I recently spoke to a lady named Aurora, cool name. She's doing a game to help blind people communicate with other blind people. So it's more of a community project, and she's going to go through the community project website. I forget what it's called, but just Google it, you'll find it.
So one bit of very hyper-specific advice that I would give about crowdfunding is, anybody here read webcomics? Like any webcomics at all? Yeah.
What?
Right. So there's this advertising company called Project Wonderful that you have probably seen some of their ads next to your favorite webcomics that aren't Penny Arcade, because Penny Arcade is way too rich for that shit. But everybody else who runs a webcomic, with like a few exceptions, is super poor, and so they put Project Wonderful ads all over their comic, and Project Wonderful is ridiculously cheap compared to like any other advertising service. Like Google AdWords costs like 100 times as much as Project Wonderful. I spent like $150 on Project Wonderful and got, I think, like 5 million views out of that or something ridiculous. And yeah, it's a really super awesome and cheap advertising company. You should totally use it.
So there's also a bit of a fallacy around crowdfunding, which I've come across in a couple of crowdfunding campaigns I've done myself as well. In terms of like a lot of, I guess, social media gurus would tell you that crowdfunding is a great way to build an audience. But I know I've definitely had different experiences. I know you guys have had different experiences yourself. Do you
Not
want
true. That's
give us a little bit of insight on that?
I think that is true.
Well, it
might be,
depends on
for Kickstarter, it might be because it's like kind of been around long enough that they've developed their own community, that there are legitimate people out there that think that it's cool to like, just like kind of surf what's out there and see what projects would appeal to them that they could fund. But in Australia at the moment, like, a lot of people don't even know what crowdfunding is here yet, let alone constantly on the site surfing it saying, oh, well, what can I give my money away to today? It doesn't work that way.
Surfing on Kickstarter.
Yeah. As much as like, we actually, I feel really stupid saying this, but it's true. We actually emailed the like admin of the site Possible when a project wasn't doing as well as we'd hoped, and we actually kind of went on a shameless campaign where we were emailing people from that had done funded projects that were similar to ours, saying, hey, you got some time, come check out our project. And the guy basically, like the owner of the site Possible, came into us and said, you guys can't do that. It's basically harassment or like
then I did
cold call. that just made it so much better. But then we turned around to him and said, well, dude, like we came on here, you're taking 4% of our cuts, and so far we haven't seen like your site provide anything in the form of traffic to our product or anything like that. Like, what's the relationship meant to be like? And he said, well, that's not our responsibility. It's all up to you in order to make the audience. We're only a platform.
We have found that you have to build a crowd before crowdfunding. And you can build that crowd on Reddit, you can build it on Facebook, you can build it on Google+, build it on everything you possibly can, then launch a campaign when you know you have supporters.
I hear that Twitter is used by a lot of people. I personally have not, ever been able to keep tweeting for more than a day before I just run out of things to say. But people who do use Twitter, you guys have a lot of advantage there. If you actually have followers, that's a cool thing.
I'm addicted.
Yeah, cool. Pretty sure everybody knows about Board Game Geek as well. But for those of you that don't know about Board Game Geek, I don't know where you'd be. But pretty much you have to, those sites are based on community, so they can spot a traveling salesman from a mile away. So if you think that you can just kind of rock up to these sites, be like, hey guys, I'm trying to get this game crowdfunded, go check it out when you can, bye. Doesn't really work that way. No one's going to pay you any attention. It's like, why should we, give this guy the time of day who hasn't provided anything to our community yet or anything like that at all? So you really have to get that sense of community, show that, you're one of them. I mean, because you are at the end of the day, if you're a board game designer, you should be a board game player. So you should be involved in these communities if you expect anything from them.
So to give you guys one data point about where I got my funding, a third of it came from people browsing Kickstarter and being like, hey, this looks cool, I'm going to donate to it. A third of it came from people getting linked off of Facebook. My Facebook and other people's, and I'm pretty sure that there is very few people who are fans of Sixpence Games, though you should all totally go click the like button.
We'll have all the links at the end.
But there's
shameless plugs.
Yeah.
But to do the flip side of that, for a crowdfunding campaign, I've had the data points on that. 85% were people I knew and 15% were people I didn't. Well, actually less than that. It's probably closer to 10 or 5% of people I didn't know.
Yeah, so the last third came from everything else combined. So everything that I spent money on, it only got me a third of the stuff that I ended up getting. Board Game Geek, really awesome, really expensive to advertise on. In my experience, maybe not worth it to advertise on. But there is a really cool thing where if you have already published a game and you make promos for it and you give them to Board Game Geek, for every $1 of promo that you give them that they can sell in their store, they will give you $1 of advertising, and you can manufacture $1's worth of promo for 2 cents. So
I suppose I might add to that. I actually went to a Possible talk with the guy who actually runs it, and he practically said Possible runs off people bringing in their crowds. They said if you pretty much go in there expecting people to throw money at you, he said it's just not going to happen. He kind of said that, and it sounds like you guys found it out pretty much the hard way. But he's pretty much staying up front. Kickstarter, I think, might be slightly different. I think there's enough people that just go there and just troll, looking for things to spend money on. Where Possible's pretty much you go in there with your fans. If you have 300 fans, good luck getting 30 of them back to chip in.
I wish I'd been trolled.
And it's not just Possible as well. We also have Indiegogo and Rocket Hub available for Australians as well, which are international sites, but they don't go through Amazon Payments, so anyone can set up an account there.
I should add to that as well. I'm under the impression that Amazon UK lets you sign up as an Australian to get a UK bank account, which lets you advertise onto Kickstarter with the US. That's what I've been told. I haven't tried it yet. I will be trying to do that shortly. But I believe it's possible.
We won't be responsible if you end up in jail following Wes's advice.
Yep, I said nothing.
So going back to Board Game Geek, because I find this really fascinating. Before I ask these guys, how many people have got accounts at Board Game Geek? Hands up.
Vote for our games.
All right.
Just rank them.
Firstly that. Secondly, I want to ask everyone here, how do you guys find the community at Board Game? Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, whether you find them friendly or not friendly.
We can't see your fingers.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of sideways as well.
I'm seeing a lot more sideways and down than up.
in the back there.
Is it more for Euro games or card games or
Everything.
Everything, yeah.
Everything.
So, there's fans of everything on there. But I actually wanted to see how you guys felt about the board game community. How do you feel the Board Game Geek game designer community specifically in that game design forum?
It's incredibly, it's absolutely everything. When I started when I made my official, hey, I'm a designer and I designed this board game account, an admin emailed me and was like, hey, are you the same Thomas Elliott who wrote 2 campaigns for Werewolf the Apocalypse in 1994? And I'm like, no. That guy exists. Okay, so I have a little 2 after my name on there because but it just shows you absolutely everything is on there, which is really cool, and a lot of people do just hang out there and talk. So I regret that I mostly just read and don't comment, because now I don't have a big backlog of comments that people can check out, but I should do that more, I guess.
It's definitely a give and take community. You get what you put in. As I said, they spot a traveling salesman a mile away, so you just kind of breeze on by, say, check this out. They're going to ignore you. But if they can see that you're somebody that regularly contributes to play tests, regularly goes to the print play threads, and you're regularly helping out fellow game designers, it goes both ways. It's well, this guy's helping out other people. Why wouldn't I help him or her out? Sorry, that sounded really sexist. I'm just throwing the pronouns out there, just automatically assume. But it's definitely give and take.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you I don't have a big history backlog on Board Game Geek, but one of the guys who played I demoed my game for him, at the end he was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna write up a review of this on Board Game Geek, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then later on I look it up and I was like, oh, this guy has 9,000 reviews that he's put up. He's the 3rd most popular reviewer of all time, and he gave my game an 8 out of 10. And I'm like, all right, that just got me 500 more clicks in
How much
an
did you
hour.
pay him?
So yeah, get your games in front of as many people as you can, and then tell them to talk about it.
Okay, so we're heading up to the last 10 minutes of the panel. So I guess we'll throw this out to you guys. Who's got questions? And I will run to you if anyone raises their hand. There we go. Of course, they're up the back. All right, where were we? Questions? Okay, we'll go this one first because you're closest.
Hi. I was just wondering, you talked about game design books, and you've had a bit of a passive-aggressive argument about whether games are thematic and mechanical, or whether they're always a mixture. And so I was just wondering if you have read, and if you have, what your opinion is of the journal on game design called Mechanics, Dynamics, Aesthetics. If you've read, no?
I haven't read
I
it.
haven't?
I'm going to write that down.
No, thanks for that.
It's like we learned too.
Thank you, though.
I suppose just maybe a response to that question slightly is that design mechanics or aesthetics, you can start from either point and then you work towards the other. Generally,
Yeah, it's the general thesis is that all games are okay, so this is kind of supporting one side of this argument, but it's basically saying that all games are a combination of those three elements. Aesthetics provides context for the mechanics and are joined by the dynamics, which are the interactions of the mechanics.
You have to start somewhere.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
was there a question in that, or was that just?
Yeah, I was asking what your opinion of it was, but you
Yeah.
haven't read it, so that's okay.
Well, basically, yeah, you can start from whatever point you feel more comfortable with, most comfortable with. Sorry, just like I said at the start in regards to Euro games versus American games, and even then, some people, they're not all of I'm only going to start once you start with a mechanics in your first game, that doesn't have to mean that I can only start with mechanics on every other game now because now that's what I've locked myself into. It doesn't work that way. You can have just an concept come to you. You can play a game and go, wow, that mechanic is really cool. I'm going to steal that. Improve that.
But you can run through, you could have a game mechanic and a game theme, and then in 12 months' time after playtesting it, it's a completely different game as well. So you don't stick to what you've got there.
I'd say mechanics make a good game. Aesthetics sell a game. So there are two things that if I put up a purely mechanic game on Kickstarter, people are going to go, that looks like a game. If I put up a zombie hack and slash with chainsaws and flamethrowers on there, people go, that's really cool, but the game may be completely non-existent.
But we'll buy it because it looks cool.
Exactly.
I'm
So
not
that's
getting into
different things. So ideally both.
I'm not getting into this argument, so we're going to the next question.
So you guys have talked about getting your games into Australia. How do you handle the fulfillment aspects, which is, I guess, the last yard?
I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, well, so what do you mean by?
Are you talking about packaging or actually just getting it in the cartons and?
How do you get it in the hands of the actual people? That
Oh, you're saying
release
distribution. We self-distribute, so our sales manager, he's like a dog, basically, just dog going after a bone.
Wheeze where you don't want him to?
Sorry?
Wheeze where you don't want him to? Never mind.
No. My hearing's not that good. So he does cold calls. We go do in-store demos, in-club demos. We go to the expos. We do as much marketing as we can. We'd like to do more on the Facebooks and Twitters, but we just don't have the spare time. But I think the main thing to do is don't just produce a game, sit back and think that's great, I've got a game, please come to it. I mean, it's obvious, but yeah, you have to call up the stores, you have to call up the distributors.
Every day we're hustling.
And you have to give them an incentive for wanting to buy your game and to sell your game, and that's basically you're marketing it. And if they know that you're going to do the hard yards, then they'll go, oh yeah, it's a doddle, we'll take it and we'll put it up on the shelves.
You need to make a lot of contacts as well. Anyone that you can get in contact with that will sell your game, represent your game anywhere. I think we went through good games, and they're great supporters of us, and they've helped distribute our game to quite a few stores.
But that contact seriously came from just being regular patrons of Good Games. We became good friends with the store manager and just spoke to him about what's your distribution, how do you get in contact with them. He gave us the contact, and then that way we then got hold of them, sent them the package, and then from the rest is history, as they say. It's all about you've got the community at your fingertips. It's just a matter of tapping into it.
And it also depends largely on how many you're trying to sell. So I'm doing a print run of 1,500 for Professor Pugnacious, 300 of which are going to Kickstarter backers. The other 1,200 my current plan is to send them to Game Salute, which is a distribution and fulfillment company. They have a booth in the PAX, right over there, that you can go check out what they've currently got. And they are going to try to get all those into retail. So yeah, you can hire. There are companies that will do this for you.
All right, we got a question down here.
Try and go fast.
That guy at the back.
Yeah, it's got really tight.
Sorry.
Standing in the front.
A question at the front. Go for it.
I guess I just wanted to. At what point can you give up your day job to become a full-time board game designer? Is there that much money in it? I guess. Like, it
If
sounds
you
really
are
tight.
going to be thinking about designing a game, do not think about making money. That is the end line.
That's always so discouraging and depressing though. Like I always hated like whenever I was like, you know, I started off as a writer and like that's like the worst possible thing, like course you could ever go to. You would never meet like a writing teacher that'd be like, oh, you're gonna meet success right off the bat. It's pretty much like these are the people that fail. J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, just all this, like, it's just depression. But like you can like. If you want to do this, you will be successful at it. It's basically like anything like in life. If you feel like this is your passion, then you will do well at it. Of course, like
the time has come for this cookie. Nom nom nom. Oh nom 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 nom. Ah. Bye bye.